Yep. So firstly, International Service is a developmental agency that was established back in the 1940s following floods that happened in Holland. But since then, they actually went over and became a United Nations Association organization to help alleviate the suffering that the floods created. Now from there, the trustees of this organization moved more into development. In the 70s, they went into Asia, Africa, Middle East, and also Europe. And then currently, they operate in a number of countries, whether it's in South America, Africa, or in the Middle East. And I worked as a team leader and as a program manager, both in the occupied Palestinian territories and in Ghana. Now, the way that they work towards achieving their aims of delivering a human rights-based approach to development, whether that is alleviating poverty or whether that's working to establish routes to education or the health system for those for their beneficiaries or service users, is through working with both the government of the United Kingdom, that's through DFID, Department for International Development, through the International Citizenship Service Scheme, or ICS, a lot of words, a lot of acronyms, or whether it's working with US Aid or the Swedish development organizations. They have a number of donors that enable them to deliver the services in order to achieve their aims. Yeah, so I'll focus more on Ghana because that was most recent. I worked with them in Palestine in 2013. I worked in Ghana in 2015. Now in Ghana as a team leader and program manager, it involved two sides. It involved two core duties. The first duty was on a pastoral side, and this was managing a team of 12 volunteers in a very rural area of northern Ghana called Savlugu, which was in Savlugu, Nanton district. Now this involved everything from helping them move into their new community, helping them establish themselves within host homes. So this was actually living with the local community, which was giving them abilities through an ethnographic perspective. So this was actually living with people from that community in order for them to understand who they were, why they were there, and then really feel closer to them. Secondly, it was to enable them to develop as young people. So really to infuse that idea of international citizenship, working with other communities that are not familiar with themselves. And the way that they did this is through working on the scheme in that country. Now, the second side of this, of my role, really intertwines that first side, and that is working with international service, working with a local partner who were called the Non-Formal Education Division. That's the side of the Ghanaian government. And through this partnership, they delivered educational lessons, and they also delivered lessons on how to achieve a cooperative. Now, this was a cooperative that was part of a livelihoods building and awareness building program that DFID wanted International Service to achieve. Now, the way that the volunteers and the young people the way that they worked on that was through working with the NFED, Non-Formal Education Division, going into the local communities, running focus groups with the local people, finding out what they wanted us to do, not what was dictated by us, but what they wanted us to do, what their needs were, and then over the next 12 weeks we would do baseline research, so go into their community, walk around, talk to people, find out how best we can utilize the budget that was given to us, and then also implement that within the 12 weeks and really lay the foundations so the next cohorts of volunteers on the ICS program could continue the work that we had started. So I think one of the main differences really is there is when you go and work in any sort of environment, whether it's moving from Manchester to London or whether it's moving from the UK to Ghana, is a culture shock. What is different between what the community or the culture that you've just come from to the one that you've just moved into? And especially when it's a UK citizen whose norms are maybe living in a predominantly white area, or even a multicultural area of southeast London, and then you go to an area of Ghana, it is completely different. And you get this culture shock of, I don't know where the local shop is, I don't know what the local language is, I don't know what the local custom is. Do I shake people's hands? Do I not? Do I say hello to people? Do I not? When I say hello to people, do I say more? Is it seen as rude if I don't? So the difference with Palestine is you do not shake hands with women because it's predominantly Muslim. You always talk to the male of the families. When you go into your workplace, it is predominantly male, and you have to, the way that you talk to the employees, it's usually to the male first and then to the female. So having to assimilate into this new society, that was quite challenging, but at the same time, I didn't feel a culture shock when I was in Palestine, and I think this is because, one, I'd been to the Middle East before, two, I knew Arabic, so I kind of could break down those barriers when I first met people, and three, I was very much excited about going to the Middle East because I'd done studies in Middle Eastern studies at university, so I was really ready for the challenge. Whereas going to Ghana was a complete culture shock, because even though English is the main language, official language as far as the government's concerned, when you rock up into Savlugu Nanton district and you go to a local shop, no one speaks English. They all speak either Chi or Dagbani, and trying to learn that quickly is very, very difficult. And also the roles within the family. For instance, I tried to pick up a bucket of water and take it from A to B. That is seen as a woman's duty within Ghana. So the fact that I was doing that was a bit odd, and everyone laughed at me. So it was really finding ways of how do you actually fit into this new culture? What do I bring to this new culture, and what can I take away from that new culture as well? And it was a lot more challenging in Ghana because it was just completely new to me, completely alien. But at the same time, I loved that because it was the best challenge that I faced. Yeah, so in Ghana, our budget came straight from DFID and the ICS program, and that was given to our local office in Tamale, and then from there we would write a program report, a program design. So this is how we would utilize this money. Once we had written this, we would submit it. It would get signed off by our head office, and then the money that was involved would come to us at our office in Savlugu. Now, out of all of the other teams within Ghana, my team was given the most money because we had the most volunteers. ICS works on the premise that each volunteer is worth a certain amount of money. I had 12 of them, and then I got a lot of money. I had the nickname the donor within the other team leaders. But what this meant was I had a pool of money with a certain requirement, a certain project to deliver. But it also meant that I could go to the local communities, the 6 of them. I could sit down with the service users. I could do a focus group, find out what their needs were, what their wants were, and then build a project around that. Never said how much money I had, because that's the worst thing that you can do. Because once people know how much money you have, they will want more, not necessarily need more. And then from there, we would start delivering the program. So this is everything from logistics, resources, paying for staff movement, which really comes into logistics again, watching out for things like corruption. So accountability was really the prime thing that we had to look out for. So receipts were everything. trying to get 18 to 25-year-olds, mainly 18, 19-year-olds, to know how necessary receipts are, especially in Ghana where taxi drivers do not have receipts. You have to give them a receipt and ask them to write down. So that was our first accountability on the ground. The second one was doing midterm reports and final reports as well. This was basically on what our inputs were, what our outputs were, and what the impact of the money that was spent were. This was all in writing that would then go back to our main office. They would put that with the receipts, and then all of that would go back to DFID in a monitoring and evaluation report. And all of that was then assessed, given to the UK government, and then everything is accountable to the taxpayers' money that was spent on the project that we were working on. So really, when it comes down to development, the money that comes into that organisation, if it's coming from DFID or coming from a government institution like US Aid or Australia Aid, etc., it's always accountable to a taxpayer. So it's really necessary that the NGO or the charity that is receiving that money ensures that the staff that they employ on the ground receive receipts and can actually say where their money went and what impact it had. Okay, so firstly, going back to Palestine, they work with Birzeit University, and they work in a number of ways, whether it's advocacy towards changing the way that the people, the government, either whether it's the Palestinian Authority, whether it's a local government within Bethlehem or Ramallah, or whether it's the way that the Israeli government treats disabled people at checkpoints, etc. So working in advocacy, it's trying to change the way that whether there's any sort of taboos in place or any sort of inequalities in place within the policies of those organisations. And then secondly, it's really trying to change the way that the youth look at disabilities, because they are the next generations that will go into those organisations. Now in Ghana, it's more practical. So this is working, for instance, in Sandemar, there's the LIFE project. Now they work with disabled people throughout that region because you have a number of different problems. The first one is taboo. So what are the religious, what are the social taboos that are in place towards people with disabilities? So for instance, if a family gives birth to someone with a disability, how does the community see that family? How do they see that child? In the past in Ghana, there was a lot of taboo around that, whether it's curses, witchcraft, whatever. So really it's trying to change those norms without really being invasive to one's beliefs or one's religious beliefs, but still trying to say that someone with a disability, it's nothing to do with a religious belief. It is someone as a person. It's humanistic. So really what they are doing within Ghana on that side is trying to change social perspectives, social views of disabilities. And then on the second side, it's also going back to the advocacy. So going to the local government, going to the regional government and saying, okay, can we start putting ramps in place for people in wheelchairs? Can we start doing events to try and acknowledge that the fact that you do have people that can play wheelchair basketball, or people, just because they cannot walk or just because they cannot use their limbs, they can still play certain games. They still have a mind, they can still play chess, for instance. So there are all these different ways. There's advocacy, there's working actually in the community on practical schemes. And in national service, really at the fore of this, as far as other charities are concerned on ICS.
Right. Thank you for such an interesting and informative interview.
That's okay. Thank you very much.